Thank you for downloading this RealAgriculture podcast. Excite your crops with inputs from Excite Bio. Access nitrogen and phosphorus with Excite Bio's lineup of inoculants and ag biologicals. Since 2010, they've been helping farmers harness the power of the soil. Learn more at excitebio.ca. That's XITEBIO.ca.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Tuesday edition of the show. Hey, thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. Also, a big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. No matter where you are, it is great to have you. Great audience in Canada and the United States for RealAg Radio, and we really appreciate you making us part of your day, like I always say. Hey, today on the show, it's Tuesday. Lindsay's not here today. I guess I'm the guest host today. We're doing a bit of a switcheroo. She is going to do the Farmer Rapid Fire this week, and I'm going to be doing a live broadcast. It'll be played on Thursday, a broadcast from the Ag Excellence Conference. Farm Management Canada is going to have me. I'll be back on the stage, third year in a row. Really looking forward to it. Got a great panel of some farmers from British Columbia. We'll talk about a number of different farm management issues, political issues. We're going to have lots to discuss at the Farm Management Conference, Ag Excellence, this week. And then we'll all be back on Friday for the Real Ag Issues panel, pending travel and all that kind of stuff. Hey, today on the show, we've got the CEO of the RFA, the Renewable Fuels Association. We've got Geoff Cooper joining us. A lot of biofuel issues right now in the U.S., and they connect to Canada. They connect, okay? We're going to try to bring some of that puzzle together for you. We've got a product spotlight with Holly Gelech from SGS. We're also going to be joined by John Newton of Terrain. I am a big fan of John Newton. He was economist with the Senate Finance Committee, the Senate Ag Committee in the U.S. He just recently moved over to Terrain. Formally, before being in the Senate, he was, and working for Senator Boozman, he was with the American Farm Bureau. Okay, so great experience. And he is a fantastic analyst, economist, does some great work. Looking forward to hearing from John today on the program. And then we're going to have a Farm Safety Roundup with Ryan Dick. And this is a part of our Farm Safety Roundup. And we're going to talk about grain entrapment today. Serious issue, okay? This is no fooling around. Grain entrapment it's a killer. And there's some best management practices from prevention, as well as if you find yourself or somebody else in a situation where they are trapped, things to do and not do. So we'll get to all of that. If you have any feedback on today's program, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find Real Agriculture across the entire social media landscape. We're everywhere. Okay? Everywhere. You can also call the Real Ag feedback line, 855-776-6147. Got chilly in southern Alberta. Yesterday, Calgary, I heard from a few people that usually it takes 15 minutes to take their kids to school. It took about an hour. Somebody had told me they went from Okotoks to where the University of Calgary is. It took 2 hours to get to work. Snow coming fast and furious. There is some snow on the ground today here in Lethbridge. Winter is definitely in the air, just below freezing. So it's not super cold, but it's a bit of a shock to the system given it's been so beautiful through November. So I guess winter is here-ish. It's beginning, everybody. It's a reality. It's inevitable. It is inevitable. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to hear from Geoff Cooper of the RFA right after this. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147.
I'm Lindsay Smith. Joining me with Genesis Fertilizers, Terry Derbout. So thinking about where things are priced from, but also where things potentially travel from, how does Genesis Fertilizers' proposed model address the logistical challenges?
There is very little product that comes from NOLA that hits Canada, mainly Ontario and Manitoba. NOLA is New Orleans, Louisiana, as I suspect most would know that. But if it does, it comes from the river, Mississippi, up to, say, St. Louis, into a transfer terminal, into a rail car, into a distribution house in Canada, and then distributed to retails. So lots of touch points and lots of costs. Genesis Fertilizers plans on building one plant, and that one plant is for Western Canadian farmers. Not only would the investors be entitled to the fertilizer that we produce, they would also profit from the fertilizer plant.
For anyone who's interested, how Genesis Fertilizers plans to deliver this, where can they go?
The best place is our website, genesisfertilizers.com.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomists, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Right now, if you talk to anybody in the canola industry, they're going to tell you that there's a lot of excitement around biofuels and canola. Now, a lot of that is tied to, of course, renewable diesel, sustainable aviation fuel. Soybeans are also excited, but we're seeing a major expansion of domestic crush capacity in Western Canada, specifically because of biofuels. Now, there is some political risk here. We've got a government change happening in Canada. We just had an election in the U.S. We don't exactly know what the second Trump administration's view on sustainable aviation fuel, renewable diesel. What are they doing with the Inflation Reduction Act is another question. We're going to get to that with our next guest in a second. But speaking of canola, I want to tell you about Cantera Seeds and their brand new CS 4100 LL Liberty Link canola hybrid that is available this fall for planting for the first time in 2025. Okay? All you got to do to find CS 4100 is go to Cantera.com. Please check that out. Okay, let's get to our next guest. Last week in Kansas City at the NAFB meeting, I had a chance to catch up with the CEO of the RFA, the Renewable Fuels Association. This is the organization that represents biofuels for the U.S. grower and the industry. I caught up with Geoff Cooper, and Geoff and I talked about what is he expecting from the second Trump administration, and what about some of the things that we're still waiting for? Details on 45Z under the IRA. That has a major impact on Canada. We'll get to that after the discussion here with Geoff Cooper of the RFA. Geoff, how are you doing?
I'm great, Shaun. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Okay, we've got administration change in the United States. My expectation, maybe I'll get you to comment on, but I think you've got some work cut out for you to make sure, remind the new administration about the importance of biofuels.
Yeah, we certainly have our work cut out for us, I think, but we've been here before. We go through this every 4 years, and there's a change in administration. And, the first thing we do is we go right to work reminding the newcomers of the benefits of renewable fuels, the importance of some of our policy priorities, whether that's the renewable fuel standard or year-round E15. And I think with Mr. Trump, we have an opportunity to underscore that ethanol and renewable fuels really check a lot of the boxes of the things that they say are important to them, whether that's energy security. They talk about American energy dominance, manufacturing jobs, bringing manufacturing back to rural America, lowering fuel costs for consumers. Those are all things that ethanol and renewable fuels do and can help this administration achieve those goals. But we've got our work cut out for us to get that across.
When I think back to the first Trump administration, I think of small refinery exemptions and how the impact that had on the ethanol market. Do you expect we're going to go back in that direction again?
I really hope not, and I don't expect we will. And you're right, that was devastating. Those exemptions were devastating for the ethanol industry. 2018, 2019, those were two of the worst years the industry's ever had, and we attribute a lot of that to those exemptions being given out. We think things are different today. We think a lot of the companies that were asking for those exemptions in the past now have investments in renewable fuels. We've seen the oil refiners move into the renewable space. They've built renewable diesel facilities. They've converted old refineries over to renewable diesel. So exemptions would hurt them too. Exemptions would crater the RIN values for the products they're making, would undermine demand for those products. So we hope we're past those exemptions. We think the world has changed enough where hopefully we don't go through that again. I don't think anybody wants to go through that kind of mess again. It was not enjoyable for anyone involved. Our goal is going to be to just move ahead with the RFS, keep those SREs in the rear view window, and just keep moving.
Wanted to ask you about ethanol and SAF. Give us an update on your progress on that file.
Well, there is some development happening in that space. The first commercial scale facility that uses ethanol to make aviation fuel began production earlier this year. But again, we have a long way to go. It's a tremendous, huge opportunity for ethanol long term, but this isn't going to happen overnight. I mean, we're probably talking 5-10 years away, and a lot of things are going to have to fall into place for us to realize this opportunity. And at the top of that list is having the right tax policy in place. So when we talk about the 45Z tax credit, the 40B SAF credit, all those things that came out of the Inflation Reduction Act, we've got to have smart tax policy. It's got to be stable, and it needs to have durability in order for these investments to move forward.
You probably know more about this than anybody that's in this room. What is taking so long on 45Z?
It has been our biggest frustration of the year is that we're sitting here in mid-November and we still don't have even a proposed rule on 45Z. We were expecting something really in the spring or summertime and still don't have even a proposal. What we're told by the Treasury is that they're still struggling, still wrestling with how to tie in climate-smart ag practices, still struggling with some of the modeling issues and questions. And at this point, it's really a crapshoot, I think, of whether we see a proposal before the administration changes hands. This very likely is going to fall in the lap of the next administration, and then who knows what they want to do with 45Z and those IRA programs.
What does that mean for the farmer, though? There's total lack of clarity for them.
Absolutely. We know farmers are starting to think about planning decisions for next spring and ordering inputs, and they have no idea what sort of rules are going to be in place around 45Z, climate smart ag. There's no clarity on any of that. So, for all intents and purposes, 2025 is going to be a lost year, a lost opportunity. Even if we get a proposed rule tomorrow, it's not going to be finalized until well into 2025.
There's bipartisan support for domestic feedstock use.
Yep.
What is the RFA's position on that proposal?
Well, we certainly, I think, agree with those that are saying, look, U.S. taxpayer dollars should be focused on U.S. products. We should not be subsidizing imported feedstocks and imported products, especially from countries like China, where we have no fairness in our trade relationship. And so, yeah, we agree, I think, and are very supportive of some of those arguments. And I do think if there is some kind of revisitation of 45Z and maybe a rewrite under in the new Congress, how to handle foreign feedstocks is going to be one of the questions they look at. It feels like an oversight from the original bill.
Yeah, a lot of focus on obviously UCO coming from China. That's that every political leader I've talked to about this. That's the example they talk about. But this is cutting scope creep. There's a wide swath being cut here. It also impacts, say, a country like Canada.
That's right.
Where I'm sure you have heard from some of your Canadian counterparts about, does domestic mean continental, or what exactly is the definition? Does that mean Canadian canola can't make it? Canadian corn? Canada's also the largest purchaser of U.S. ethanol. You got a customer to sort of appease here too. So break that down for us.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And that's why we've been a little bit hesitant on endorsing some of the legislation that's out there that would just put a blanket ban on eligibility for any foreign feedstocks. We have great trading partners with Canada when it comes to biofuels. We don't want to penalize our Canadian friends. We get a lot of feedstock from Canada for biodiesel and renewable diesel. We ship them a lot of ethanol in return. That's working well. We don't want to mess that up. So as we think about the foreign feedstock question, our position really has been, let's draw a circle around the problem. The problem is Chinese used cooking oil and, frankly, Brazilian tallow we would put on that list as well. We don't have fair and free trading relationships with either one of those countries when it comes to biofuels. So our position has been, if they're going to treat us a certain way, we should reciprocate that treatment for their feedstocks coming in and their finished biofuels coming in too.
Geoff, really appreciate the conversation and look forward to our next chat.
All right. Thanks so much, Shaun.
That was Geoff Cooper, CEO at the Renewable Fuels Association. So I do believe that this is one of the issues that is very much floating under the radar of Canadians. It's a big deal. And I think when, the last year or so, we've been talking a lot about protectionist sentiment increasing in the United States. Okay, it's really happening in many parts around the world. When we saw in early November here that the winner of the U.S. election was going to be former President Trump, we're going to have a second Trump administration, I think it heightens the political risk for a country like Canada. And a lot of people are going to be focused on dairy. That is like the sole agricultural issue that needs to be discussed and will be discussed. And the rest of us are just going to be fine. And I'm here to tell you, everybody, I think that is very overstated and it is incredibly naive on our part. And I'm going to keep on singing from the mountaintop here on a number of these issues. And one of them is the threat to Canadian canola crush capacity expansion. If you think that all of this expansion that's been announced has to do with the food side of the canola equation, I think you've missed it a little bit. It is all about the excitement around renewable diesel, sustainable aviation fuel. And a big part of that happening, or the facilitating that outcome of that success, is the American market. And a big push here on the tax credit side is something like 45Z. Now, there's issues for canola when it comes to carbon intensity scoring, and that's a whole separate issue. When it comes down to just the pure qualification for the tax credit, upwards of $1 a US a gallon in the tax credit, canola is going to want to participate in that. Western Canadian canola is going to want to participate in that. And I still say canola grown in the Northern Plains because a lot of that canola is crushed in Western Canada. They're going to want Canada to be able to participate as well. This is a big threat. And that's why I bring the interview here with Geoff Cooper from the RFA to you to be able to hear it and understand it. There is a big risk here that Canada's going to have to deal with. It's not just about dairy. There is lots of topics that are going to become big topics in this new administration. And we're going to have a new government in Canada. You would assume if you believe what the polls are saying at this point, there's some stuff that's going to have to be worked out. It can be overcome. These aren't like impossible missions, but it's more than just dairy. That is a big agricultural issue between Canada and the U.S. Canada has some stuff going for it, though, right? Huge purchaser, the largest purchaser of U.S. ethanol, as you heard there in the conversation with Geoff Cooper. If in all reality, in order to serve and meet some of the requirements the U.S. is talking about making when it comes to sustainable aviation fuel, renewable diesel, they need Canadian feedstocks. They're an important component to the supply chain. We get back to this integrated supply chain that's being talked about so negatively by the incoming administration, but it's currently it is a reality. You just can't pick up 20 million acres of canola and move it to Montana. You could, I guess, not necessarily reality. So, yeah, that's one I want you to keep your eye on. What is going on with biofuel policy in the U.S., in this administration? What are the details of 45Z? Because it has an impact on Western Canada and Central and Eastern Canada as well. Okay, let's take a break. When we come back, we've got more RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM, right after this. Meet new Husky Pre-herbicide, Koch's apex predator. Fight back against the toughest broadleaf weeds with Western Canada's first Group 27 herbicide for pre-burn and pre-emergent applications in cereals. A potent addition to Roundup, Husky Pre delivers fast-acting and reliable early-season control of broadleaf weeds, including resistant species. If you're tired of all bark, no bite with your cereal pre-burn, ask your local retailer for Husky Pre herbicide today. Always read and follow label directions.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
If you're serious about agriculture, RealAg's got you covered.
For over 10 years, we've listened to and shared what producers have to say about everything from policy to agronomy from coast to coast.
Keep up with the latest in Canadian agriculture at RealAgriculture.com through daily newsletters, and check out our YouTube channel.
Thanks for joining us in the RealAg community as we continue to cover and serve North American agriculture.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio. I'm Lindsay Smith, and joining me now is Holly Gelech. She is the Senior Manager of Business Development for SGS Canada. Welcome here, Holly.
Welcome, Lindsay. I'm thrilled to be on the radio today with you.
Yes, and when I think seed testing, I think Holly. So there you go. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Tell us, Holly, what are you seeing in trends this fall from the seed tests that have already come through?
Absolutely. Well, with seed being one of the most important decisions on the farm, our seed laboratories have been focused on delivering reliable and prompt results for farmers as well as seed growers. So we have been hectic in the laboratory since August. So let's talk a little bit about some pointers to bring you up to speed about what a seed laboratory really looks like. Get you some visuals going for you on the radio. So our seed laboratory is split into 3 areas. The first one being all our growth-based tests. This would include germination, cool stress testing, trait testing. Trait testing is similar to a clear field confirm that you conduct on your lentils or as well as on your wheat. The second area is a disease laboratory, which we do quantification as well as molecular. And the last one is all the other tests. Examples would be moisture testing and kernel weight testing. So let's move on to the trends and what we've been seeing in our laboratory. So primarily germination. That is the biggest test that we do by volume in our seed laboratories. Let's look at wheat. Wheat across Western Canada is the largest acreage crop alongside, canola. Our wheat germination average has been 95% this year. So absolutely stellar, Lindsay. This is really good. This is fantastic. Keeping in mind, yes, we do have some of those top dog 100% germinations, but there are some that are down in the 80s and the 70s. So, it's kind of all over the map, but overall, germination for wheat has been really good. Looking at some of the other cereals, barley, 94% germination. Oats, now this is one to talk about. So oats in Western Canada tends to be one of the crops that, is harvested later, tends to have frost damage, weathering, when it rains or when it snows. So we're seeing 93% average on the oat germination. So this is a stellar year. Lindsay, this is very good. Typically average for oats is in the 80s. So we're looking for cereals, really good. Peas, 92% is the average germination. We have seen though some samples that are impacted by dry seed, moving the seed around, and what that causes is abnormal seedling. So this is something, peas is really, really important to get a germination test because it's common to get 50%, 60% on account of abnormal seedlings. So yeah, germination's good. From the disease laboratory, very inconsistent. Our geography in Western Canada is very large. We've seen overall infection levels lower, but, overall it's still showing up. So if you're a pea grower, for instance, we are still seeing that 20% of the samples we're testing has Ascochyta. So, we need to still be on top of it, even though we've had regions that have been very dry. And that really reduces the amount of disease in seed. It's still showing up, Ascochyta, at 20% of the samples.
Now, you've touched on, of course, some really key things that farmers have to consider when deciding on seed lots, maybe trying to find a different seed lot if some of those numbers come back way below expectation or really what they need. So do you have pointers then for farmers who are sending in samples?
Now is the time to send in samples. This is an ideal time before it gets too cold out there. And so when farmers and seed growers are submitting samples, what are you going to ask for? Germination, absolutely. Germination, keep in mind, is the ideal growing condition. Cereals and pulses, we grow them at 20 degrees Celsius in the lab. So this is the best test to be doing. All the grade tables are set up that way. So anytime you're buying certified seed with that blue tag, you're getting a germination test alongside of it. So that's the same for farmers, germination testing. Cool, stress, vigor is very important too if you're planning on putting the seed in the ground under cool conditions. So our cool vigor test is conducted at 7 degrees Celsius. And I believe that more matches with what seed temperatures and soil temperatures are going into the ground. So cool vigor testing is very important when you're planting early, which farms are getting bigger. So, the need for vigor testing is definitely growing. Disease testing, of course, we covered that off. That's very important. It responds to your local issues as well as identifies any emerging issues that you may be having in your fields. And then lastly, kernel weight testing. Don't waste your money on kernel weight testing until your product is cleaned, right? Because when you clean it, you're taking out 10, 15%, those smaller broken kernels, etc., all the weeds, etc. So kernel weight testing, really important for precision planting once the product is cleaned.
And of course, for all those who are going to take your advice and get those samples in early, where can they go for more information? Is there a 1-800 number? Should they head to the website? Where can people go for more?
Oh, absolutely. You can reach out to us in a number of ways. Our telephone number, 1-800-952-5407. That reaches out to me at our Sherwood Park location. We also have a site in Grand Prairie as well, and you can find them online. Our website is cropscience.sgs.ca, and we look forward to hearing from you. Get those samples in early.
Holly, thank you so much for joining me today on the radio show. All right, we'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this. Joining me today, Mike Schaefer, Field Sales Manager with New Seed. Why should a grower in the upper Midwest be looking at adding the omega-3 canola production system to their lineup?
From a program perspective, we've got delivery windows, which growers ask for. They want to have more control on when they bring their bushels in. There's premiums associated with each window. There is a 10 bushel act of God on this contract. The act of God does not exist a whole lot anymore. We've got an early commit program where you pick up $1.50 with an ITG signed up by December 5th. We really appreciate our grower base, and returning growers will pick up another $1 a hundredweight. We've got a crop input incentive anywhere from $15 to $20 per acre, depending on the amount of acres that you do it. And that is a check back to you during or shortly after the growing season.
Growers in the upper Midwest, where can they go for more information?
A quick Google search, omega-3 canola. There's a box there that you can get an interest form filled out, and then that gets fired off to us FSMs, get you in touch with the right people.
The next generation of Brandt U-Trough augers is here. They can move up to 9,000 bushels per hour, even in the harshest of conditions. Visit your local Brandt dealer today. You can find out more by going to brandt.ca. Lots happening, as I mentioned, in the political landscape. One of the economists that I really like to read and follow and listen to is John Newton. He is with Terrain. Ag profitability at the farm gate level is a concern in the U.S. as well as it is in Canada on the 24 crop and definitely on the 25 crop. We've seen this in the Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index that we've been talking about. Farmers are concerned about the current farm financial performance. They're a little bit more optimistic about the future, but there is concern. John Newton and I talked in Kansas City at the NAFB meeting. We started with farm profitability. We took it in a whole bunch of different directions, given that we are going to have a new administration in the White House. And what does that mean for farm policy going forward? Here's John Newton of Terrain. Farm profitability. It seems like that's the big topic here. Going booth to booth here at NAFB. Obviously, talking to a lot of members of our audience on both sides of the border. Profitability is a problem for 25 potentially.
Well, and no one knows that better than the farmers that are listening right now. I mean, you think USDA has already come out with their projections for input costs going into 2025, and it's higher. For a lot of the major crops, corn production expenses are projected to go up. At the same time, the most recent baseline, long-run baseline from USDA, suggests that we could see even lower prices in 2025. So you put the two of those together, it's even tighter margins, prices even further below break even, and this is going to be for the second consecutive year in a row.
You spent a lot of time analyzing this. Is this something that has a hold of us potentially for a longer period, or are there signs of ways to break out of this?
I think there are always ways to break out of it. You just don't know what's going to happen. And go back to the most recent run-up that we're coming out of. It started in 2019. We had 20 million acres that couldn't get planted in the U.S. You follow that up with China beginning to start making their phase one purchases, where they purchased over $30 billion worth of ag products for 3 straight years in a row. So strong exports combined with tighter stocks drove the prices higher. Then you had the uncertainty, the geopolitical risk with Russia, Ukraine, which pushed prices even higher again. No one saw that coming. I've said to folks, at some point, when you've had so many black swan events in a row, they're just swans. And no one knows what's going to happen, but I'm optimistic for agriculture. I know farmers are resilient, they're innovative, and they're thinking about how to make it through a challenging environment next year.
You can take this question whatever way you want. What do you expect from Trump 2.0 as they enter the White House in January?
I think right now it's too early to tell. We don't know who, importantly, will be the Secretary of Agriculture. And the Secretary of Agriculture, their job is to stand in the Oval Office with President Trump and explain why or how certain policies will impact agriculture in rural America. So once you find out who's in that seat, the ag community can come together and work with that individual, whoever he or she may be, to advise the president. So I think there's opportunities in Trump 2.0. I can certainly tell you that a deregulatory agenda is going to be on the table. We'll probably see a lot of executive orders, as was the case last time. There were 2 regulations cut for every new regulation. He's promised to do 8 cuts for every new regulation now. And if folks remember, from 2017 to 2021, the Trump administration cut 217 regulations. So I can assure you that will be on the agenda very early in his presidency.
What's your read right now on what we do with the Farm Bill?
Well, you can go one of 2 ways right now. Well, we don't have one, first of all. And you can go one of 2 directions. One is you can come back to Washington, D.C. They're there now. They got about 4.5 weeks left. And you can get a full 5-year farm bill, your commitment to agriculture in rural America, over the finish line. Or you do another 1-year extension, and then people are still, hanging out there with low prices, low profitability for another year. It's challenging. I know farmers are working with their farm credit lenders now, trying to plan for what's this economic environment with or without an enhanced farm bill next year.
Yeah. I kind of thought lower prices would increase the political will to get it across the finish line. I missed the mark on that one.
I think it did in certain communities among certain lawmakers. They went back home. They heard from their farmers. They came back motivated to get a farm bill done. But the reality, Shaun, is there are other dynamics. The farm bill is a lot more than just your farm income support programs, crop insurance. 80% of it's nutrition programs. You have conservation programs, and there are still some points of disagreement between Democrats and Republicans on how to solve those issues, and that's the sticking point on the farm bill.
As every farm bill, those are the sticky points. That is not exactly a new battle being waged. The trade deficit in agriculture. I think we both know this. In the Trump administration that's coming in, trade is going to be they're going to talk about it a lot more. I was going to say more focused, but they're going to talk about it a lot more. Tackling that deficit, what are the steps to do that?
Number one, we've got to stop eating avocados. Number two, stop drinking imported beer. And number three, stop drinking tequila. Those are the three biggest imports that drove, I'm serious, look it up, that drove the negative trade deficit that we saw. But the reality is Mexico's our number one customer. You guys are our number two customer. China's our number three customer. These are important markets for U.S. agriculture. The farm economy in the United States does better when we have strong exports to our biggest partners. And I think, again, having a Secretary of Agriculture that can communicate that to the President when the time comes will be really important. Secretary Perdue did that when he came in, 8 years ago now at this point, when President Trump wanted to pull out of NAFTA. Secretary Perdue said, wait a minute, sir, it's really important to agriculture. It's really important to rural America. Canada and Mexico are among our top three trading partners at that point in time.
We know this, John. We're going to have lots to talk about in the next 4 years. Absolutely. Thanks so much for making some time for me.
Anytime.
That was John Newton with Terrain. Such a smart guy. He is excellent. Love following some of his insights. You brought up several good points there for us to keep in mind, RealAg audience. Okay, first of all, it's this pick of the USDA secretary, although doesn't get the maybe some of the fame and the fortune, the profile of being Interior Secretary or Energy Secretary, of course, like Attorney General. But it's important to our lives in agriculture, and it's got importance to not only farmers and ranchers across the United States, but also in some high trading partner countries like Canada, like Mexico, for example. John just shared that story where, President Trump in the first administration wanted to basically tear up NAFTA and say, why do we need this? Be like, so long, too bad, see you later, sayonara, NAFTA. And Secretary Perdue was one of the people that sat him down and said, whoa, wait a minute here. Wait a minute. Okay? That's the kind of relationship and respect that you need between the president and a USDA secretary. And we also saw under the time of Secretary Perdue, we also saw, and he wasn't just totally cozy with a country like Canada. I remember specifically his quote, Canada, you can keep your supply management, but we want market access. That was I remember that quote specifically. So he could be firm as well. But he also had a very good relationship. And I'm not sure if I kind of think they sort of played it up on both sides that you had Sonny Perdue from Georgia and you got Lawrence McCauley from PEI, and they would do these like visits and they would double date with their wives, and then they would do these things where they would go for ice cream, and it would be Lawrence and Sonny having ice cream, sharing old stories, and just being real friends. And I guess we all appreciated that to a certain extent as well. So that is an important selection. So and there's still. There is some names being put on the board as possibilities that are way off the radar. Like, when the Bears stretched for Mitch Trubisky in the first round, didn't pick Deshaun Watson, didn't pick Patrick Mahomes, and went with Mitch Trubisky out of North Carolina? Yes, I'm still bitter. That's going off the board. Whoa. We had this guy in the third, fourth round, this linebacker. We're picking him at the end of the first. What are we doing? Look what the Patriots do all the time, as it worked out so well as of late. that's kind of some of the names that are being thrown around right now for USDA secretary. So we'll have to see. We do know that this is a very important trading relationship between Canada and the U.S., and that's where the bulk of our audience is. So that's what we're going to talk about. And the thought of thinking about this more as a true, like as we have bricks trying to work together and find some common ground, we need to be doing that in North America. Okay? Canada, Mexico, the U.S., trying to figure out how we leverage each other for economic prosperity instead of some of the battles and the distractions that we're somewhat engaged in at this point, at a time where we do have so much integration between the three countries cross border. So fascinating time. Really appreciate John Newton's insight there from Terrain. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about grain entrapment. It's a critically important topic, and it may save your life. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Advanced canola trait technology is here. And it's soon to be the talk of the town. Optimum Glide delivers excellent yield potential and agronomic trait performance. Improved crop safety. Enhanced weed control. And a wider window of application. You're going to want to see this. Learn more at OptimumGlide.ca.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
Delivering reliable agricultural lab testing for your crops, soil, feed, water, and seed. SGS is uniquely positioned, ready to elevate your business in Canada and the United States. Call us now at 1-800-952-5407. Anyone working in the grain industry should have a clear understanding of how grain entrapment happens and be well equipped to prevent or respond to what could be a truly catastrophic incident. Ryan Dick is a health and safety consultant with Workplace Safety and Prevention Services, joining from his farm in Douglas, Ontario. We're going to look today at the risks associated with grain handling and storage, more specifically grain entrapment, and why seconds count. Ryan, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Shaun, thanks for having me. Nice to be here.
And when I think about grain entrapment, one of the things I've learned over time is it happens fast. These situations. To prevent grain entrapment, you need to understand the danger of flowing grain. How and where do grain entrapment incidents typically happen?
Well, Shaun, most grain incidents happen in the grain bin, unfortunately, but it's not just in the grain bin that these incidents happen. They can happen when you're unloading trucks. They can happen in elevator pits. They can happen in gravity bins and wagons.
So being prepared and well-equipped here are a big part of prevention and rescue efforts. So talk about that.
Yeah, being prepared is a huge portion. If these incidences happen, there's not a whole lot of time for anything to not be prepared. So the best way to do that is to have things thought of in advance. Make sure that you've done some written hazard assessments. Be aware of what the risks are going into a bin before anybody ever goes into it. Make sure you've got written procedures on how things are going to be dealt with, when they can go into the bin, what they need to go into the bin with. If something were to happen as well, it's very important to have all employees trained on rescue procedures, what needs to be done, who needs to be doing what roles, and have that stuff done ahead of the time. Because if you're waiting till the moment of an incident to happen to start thinking about these things, chances are you're not going to have either the equipment necessary on hand, the knowledge levels, or the capabilities to perform that rescue operation.
You mentioned something there that's very critical. It's one thing to have the procedures and them written down, but it's the training part of it, right? That
training is so important
if you don't do that.
Yeah, having the procedures is great. That's a first step by far, but having a procedure, but having nobody trained on how to run it is really no help at all. You want to have procedures in place and knowledge training done so that workers can carry that out through habit, not in a panic state of mind. If we've at least got some memory muscles to fall back on, we can get through a lot of these stressful situations having that advanced knowledge. But if you wait, you're done.
Now, you mentioned a lot of this is happening sometimes in the bin. So one of the ways to prevent bad situations from occurring is to keep people out of that situation and keep them out of the bin. So, talk about some of that prevention from that standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, we would never have to see somebody go into a bin. It'd be something that'd be really nice if we never had to go into, but unfortunately reality in farming is not quite that way. And there are plenty of reasons why we do end up having to go into a bin in the first place. But some of the things you can do, to prevent the risk or minimize those risks is to make sure you put in that grain away in a good condition in the first place. You can also do things like placing warning signs on all the bins and wagons to make sure everybody's aware that that is a confined space and not made for human habitation. And whenever possible, secure those areas to make sure that unauthorized access can't be done, especially with the kids on the home farm. Very difficult to make sure the kids aren't playing around those bins. You want to make sure that's very evident to them about the dangers and risks.
Yeah. Inevitably work like cleaning and maintenance, repair, it does need to get done. So if somebody does need to go into the bin in normal course of business, what are the appropriate steps they need to take?
There's a couple of things that you can do. First and foremost, you have to recognize that these grain bins are, for all intents and purposes, confined spaces. Especially depending what commodity is in there, you should be getting some air quality testing done before you're putting workers in there. Once you've got that air quality testing done, though, a couple of things that you can do. Number one, first and foremost, never work alone. Never ever work in a grain system on your own. Always have a buddy system. Don't go into the bin or cross grain if you're not wearing a safety harness and a lanyard lifeline. That can be a huge difference between rescuing somebody and having to find somebody that's in the bin. If anybody's Make sure you've communicated with all workers that are present in or around that bin. Make sure everybody is aware if anybody is going into that bin and what has to be done for them to make sure that person stays safe, as in making sure you're not unloading any other trucks, making sure the elevator legs have the proper baffle positioning on. And one of the biggest things that you can do is, as I mentioned, not go into the bin without the buddy system in place and having those rescue things. When we know we have to go into a bin, one thing that a lot of people don't consider is contacting the fire department first. For many of us, it's rural fire departments that are going to be the ones that are attending or responding to any rescue calls that happen. Very important to talk to that department beforehand. Find out if you do have rural firefighters or firefighters or any department trained in grain entrapment rescue. If not, it's a good idea to at least talk to them about it so you are aware of what services are available at your facility.
So let's just go with the scenario, the unthinkable happens here and somebody is in some form or fashion trapped. Time here is of the essence. Like in just a split second of time can mean the difference between rescue and recovery versus something
absolutely
worse, right? So take us through some of the best practices.
Well, as you said, seconds count. Every second counts in these situations. So to make sure that you've got those precious seconds that we need, have a couple of steps taken beforehand. So when we talked about prevention, you want to make sure that bin is kept clean around the outside, that access is not being prevented by equipment or implements that are in the way. You want to make sure that you don't have to waste that couple of precious seconds to move that piece of equipment when the paramedics are showing up. You want to make sure you've got the other equipment you need. Make sure you've got lanyards and safety harnesses for all workers that are going to be working in and around it, or at least have one extra beyond the person that's wearing it. Grain bins, like an old barrel or tubes that are wide enough for a person to fit into are key as far as isolating that worker from the additional flowing grains, to help isolate them sinking further. One of the things, though, is important, though, to understand is if we do have to get into a bin to do a rescue situation, any rescuers going in are going to be in the same risk of being entrapped. So you want to make sure we're having steps in place for that. So keep 2x8s, 2x6s, or ladders near those bins as well, that if you ever do have to go out onto it, you can put those boards down or the ladder across to distribute the weight of the rescuer. So when they are going into the bin, there's that much of a chance, or better chance of them accessing the person. Also, don't put additional pressure on the victim. A lot of the time, what some people may think to do is, I've got the lanyard, I've got that safety line held onto it. We've had an incident, so therefore the first thing I should do is pull him out. There's a lot of weight on that, in that grain. We all know a lot of the densities we're talking with grains. That's going to be a lot of pressure on the person. So keep in mind as well that when they're exhaling, that grain is going to kind of collapse into around that chest cavity as well to make the inhale so much harder. So we'll talk about that as far as if you're in the position at that point. And yeah, ventilate those bins. Make sure you've got some aeration systems going in there. Make sure the workers are wearing all the PPE required, not just that safety line. You're in a dusty environment. We have to consider the other risks involved as well. And that being said, anytime we are in a grain entrapment, chances are we're moving that grain. It's going to produce a lot of dust. On a normal time, I can hold my breath for a little while when I'm not stressed. If I'm stressed and it's poor air quality, I'm probably not going to be able to hold my breath nearly as long.
Staying calm is critical. But boy, that's easier said than done.
Is it ever, Shaun? I mean, you can tell somebody to stay calm all you want, but they're just words. But we talked today a little bit about training earlier on. This is where it does make the big difference, or can make a difference. If I am trapped in a grain bin and I know my coworkers have done 2 training sessions this year on worker rescue, if I'm in that grain, I have more confidence with my coworkers and anybody else on site that I will be rescued. I may not panic nearly as much. But if I'm in that bin and we have never discussed rescue, and I realize I'm in that position of being trapped, it's very difficult for someone not to panic, especially if they're working alone, if they've negated that buddy system or have not done those risk assessments. Very, very easy to have those things happen. Worst case scenario, if you ever find yourself that you are trapped in grain, especially once it gets past the knees, it's very important to stop struggling. The more you struggle, the worse you're actually going to make the entrapment. And if you get past the chest, as I mentioned, then we're going to start to run the risk of having restricted breathing potential. It's easier said than done to stay calm, as we've mentioned. But if you're ever in a situation where that's the point and it looks like it's getting worse, that there's a chance that you may be fully submerged, it's very important to keep your hands vertical as far above your head as possible. And the reason for that being that extra couple of inches of the hand sticking above the grain may make a huge difference as far as where the rescuers try to find you.
Summarize for us key takeaways that we need to remember on this topic of grain entrapment.
Key takeaways to remember is that they are confined spaces. That every farm, that these are very hazardous situations, and you should be conducting proper risk analyses. Anybody that's working in that situation should be aware of what the risks are for entrapment, as well as for the dust, for the noise, and how to control those. It's an employer's due diligence to requirement on that. Have those written hazard assessments, have written procedures on how to enter the bin and how to do the work within the bin, as well as that rescue procedure, and practice the rescue procedure. It is no good at all if it is not second nature to anybody. And it's not saying you have to practice it on a daily basis, but definitely if you're going into the season where you're moving your grains, spending an hour practicing on a mock rescue situation will make an immense difference if that situation ever occurs.
Ryan, this has been very important discussion. Thanks for sharing this vitally important message. The Canadian Agricultural Safety Association has some great resources as well, including training for local fire departments. You can go to Be Grain Safe on the Canadian Agricultural Safety Association website, and you can access easy-to-use resources like a hazard checklist at wsps.ca/farm safety. Ryan, thanks for joining us today on the Farm Safety Roundup.
Thanks for having me, Shaun. It's always great to be here.
Oh, such a critical topic. Really appreciate Ryan Dick's insight there. Hey, if you have any feedback on today's show, we covered a lot of ground. I provided a lot of thoughts, some opinions. I want yours. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find Real Agriculture across all the different social media platforms. Instagram, X, YouTube, Threads. We're everywhere, okay? You can also call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio, and we'll chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.